Hello. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hi, I'm Charlie. Um, we have such a rad panel in store for you. And I'm not going to talk too much, but I'll be here as an emotional support vice president for one Riley Santangelo. Couple quick things here at the top before we get started. This panel is for everybody. So if you have varying skills, there'll be something for you in various things. Please feel free. Why are people telling me? There's demands already in the chat. People are demanding stuff already. Well, I can't take you guys anywhere. So there's going to be a lot for everybody. We will be doing a Q&A throughout and at the end mostly. Riley has a really great sort of run a show for you to go through a bunch of different things that are very applicable to gishing because Riley, in fact, gished. So she has an intimate knowledge of what you might need to know. But a couple quick things. Gishporium, we are closing our Beeline giveaway, Beeline Bounty giveaway on Friday. We just revealed our coffee table book cover. Very excited about that. Hopefully you got to see that. It's immaculate. I love it. And what else? Lots of stuff happening at HQ that we can't quite talk about yet, but I'm not going to talk too much more. I feel like it's more important that we get to the main attraction rather than the sideshow that this is and talk. Hi, Riley.
Oh, hello. I briefly considered leaving my microphone on mute and pretending I didn't know I was muted.
That's the entire year and a half in review right there. Riley, you are a professional graphic designer, typography enthusiast, amateur cat photographer, and you live in Florida with your wife. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came to GISH and your background as a designer?
Totally. Well, hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I found out about GISH for the first time in 2015. That was my first year gishing, and I gished for 3 years, 2 of those years on a competitive team, and we were runners up both of those years, which was really, really cool. So that gave me a really good understanding of what gishers need when they're completing their items and submitting everything. So that's why I kind of wanted to keep this class applicable to things that gishers might need. So hopefully that can come across a little bit. I am a professional graphic designer, like you said. I have my bachelor's degree in graphic design, and I currently work as the art director for stands.
Wait, sorry, what? Where?
It's this little like nobody's heard of it. It's like kind of an underground merchandise company.
Wow, shots fired. Nobody's heard of it. Okay, well, okay. I've heard there's a company called Stands that stands for something. They make seats, chairs.
Yeah, it's actually it's like a combination of like chairs and seats, like a stool stand. You stand on it. Anyway,
okay. Okay. It sounds exciting. Sounds like a great place, good work environment.
It's great.
People.
Super great.
Great. Well, great. You've been responsible for some incredible design over the past the 4 or 5 years that I've known you, and we're just really excited to have you on because I think a lot of people in the audience are in need of tutorials. They want to always up their game. This is a perfect opportunity to do that.
For sure. So I have notes here. I apologize if I keep looking down. I didn't want to forget anything. So in the line of doing things that are applicable to gishers, I wanted to make sure that we are learning techniques here in Photoshop where you're fixing images, but not faking anything. So fixing, not faking will be kind of the theme here.
Commandments. Yep.
Yes. Do not airbrush your stuff. Don't make anything weird and submit it unless it's specifically part of the item.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. So are we ready?
Are you guys ready? Are you guys awake? How are you doing? Just if you're here in the chat, do a high five to Riley right now. Yeah, let's party. There you go. Boop.
I just saw somebody say yawn. It's 1 a.m. Why are you here? There's going to be a link to this afterward. Oh, I'm just looking at comments. Okay, yes. All right, well, if we're ready, then we can go ahead and get started. So I am going to share my screen. I cleaned up my desktop just for this specific purpose. So this is my Twitter handle here. Yesterday, I tweeted out a thread of some useful resources for people. I'm hoping that most people here will have access to Photoshop, but if you don't, the first tweet in that thread is a list of software programs that could be comparable to Photoshop. Some of them are free. So if you do not have access to Adobe programs, then you can find some alternatives there. And I'm hoping that if you do have access to Photoshop, you will have opened it at least once. But if you haven't, that's okay too, because I'm just going to do a really, really quick rundown on Photoshop as a program, just for the beginners, because I talked to a few people who said that they had absolutely no knowledge. They were newbies. So if you don't know already, you can customize your workspace in Photoshop. So right now, my workspace is customized. It is called Riley. So if you go to View, here at the top, oh no, sorry, not View, Window, apologies.
Excellent. Yep, I'm following.
Doing great. These are all of the panels that you can have active on your screen at any given time.
What do those panels do? Those are different windows and panels that you can use as tools, right?
Yes. So for example, right here, I'm going to move this. Right here is my navigator panel. This one is super important for photo editing because it shows you what is displayed on the screen and it gives you an easy way to zoom in and out. So if I'm super zoomed in, I can move this little box and that will show me where on my document I am. So I always have the navigator panel open. This right here is our layers panel. That is the #1 most important panel that you should have open.
Why is that so important to have open, Rami?
So layers are the different elements in your document, and you can work all on one layer, but that's what's known as destructive. And the reason it's called destructive is if you add things all to one layer, there's no way to change that or move it. It's all just flat, like a pancake. It's all one image. So if you have layers, you can turn things on and off. For example, if I click this little eye next to the stars layer, that will turn those off. And if I click on it, I can move it without changing what's on the other layers. So that is why the layers panel is super important to have. And if you don't feel like completely starting from scratch, if you go into Window Workspace, they already have some workspace options available to you. If you are mostly doing photo editing, then I would suggest using the photography workspace.
And is this, so this is, sorry, just to be clear, this is the full Photoshop application, is that right?
Yes, this is Photoshop Creative Cloud, which is the most recent iteration of Photoshop. A lot of people are still working in less recent iterations, and that's fine too. Those still work. I know that some people have a version of Photoshop that's a little bit less extensive. I think it's called Photoshop Elements. And you can still get a lot out of that.
Yeah, I use that one to Photoshop out the rest of my life. You know, like if I want to just make it disappear, I can just do that with a clone tool. Anyway, go on, please.
Totally. So whatever kind of Photoshop you have, hopefully the things that I'm going to talk about are things that you still have access to. Even if you're using a program like GIMP, GIMP, hopefully some of the tools and tricks will still be applicable. So this on the left-hand side is your toolbar that is also customizable. If you click on this little 3 dots over here, you can customize what tools go in there. And I would encourage anybody who is new at it to just kind of hover over these, learn what their names are and what they do. We're going to be working mostly with the move tool.
So you're going to be showing us some demonstrations on how to do some of these different elements within a graphic. Is that right?
That is correct.
And you've chosen to punish us with Comic Sans because
I thought it was funny.
Got it. Cool. Appreciate it. That's right. We are a safe space of fonts around here.
Just for my own amusement. It was either that or Papyrus, honestly. This one just felt better.
I didn't know you were working on the new avatar. That's great.
Yeah. Or, Pirates of the Caribbean or anything like that. I wanted to mention too, I'm going to try really hard not to do this because I want you guys to see exactly what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. But I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to learn keyboard shortcuts for Photoshop. They're also known as hotkeys. And that is any action that you take in Photoshop. For example, if I say File, Save, or if I do select, I can't do it right now because I don't have anything selected, but those actions that you take, which is a 2 or 3 step process by doing it like this, can be done in 1 or 2 seconds just by using keyboard shortcuts. So for example, instead of going File, Save, you would just do Command S, something like that. And I also tweeted out a link where you can find those keyboard shortcuts for both Mac and PC. And I know that it doesn't seem like a lot. You're saving yourself at the most a couple of seconds every time. But for somebody like me who's in Photoshop at least 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, year after year after year, I'm saving myself a lot of time. And it just makes your work smoother.
So learning those shortcuts and like automations with the keyboard helps you save time, which is good because if you're doing, let's say, a scavenger hunt and you have limited time, you may want to try some shortcuts and workarounds to be able to get stuff done fast.
Exactly.
Oh, and someone said you're saving, Monica says you're saving your wrist ligaments too. That's
very true. You don't have to do much more of this motion. You can instead just do this motion. Okay, so I'm going to try not to use any keyboard shortcuts so I can show you the exact process. But if I start doing that, Charlie, please let me know that I'm not showing people what I'm doing.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, also, I have a note here that says save often, which is something.
Wait, why would you save often, Riley? What purpose could that possibly have? Hey, Maud, we're seeing some issues with people seeing the top of the screen based on some issues with raise hand, etc. Is that something we can take care of in the comments there? I think there's a couple people with that issue. Anyway, please, Riley, I interrupted. I'm ready to listen and take in all this information. I'm actually photoshopping something right now that I can't talk about, but I'm going to Photoshop it while you go.
I'm excited. So it's important to save often because especially if you have a lot of documents open at the same time, or if your computer is a little bit older or slower, the program is likely to crash at any given moment. So I would suggest just either coming over here and saying file save or doing the Command S shortcut, just whenever you think about it, once every 10 minutes, maybe, which is something that I do not do ever. And I have lost many a project because of it. I need to remember to do that. It is extremely important. Okay, so now that we have all of the basics, I'm going to start with an actual document. So here we have a beautiful sunset. And I'm sure that this is something that a lot of people can relate to, where you try to take a picture of a beautiful sunset and you get the gorgeous colors, but everything else is extremely dark, or you focus on the foreground and it completely washes out all of the beautiful sunset colors. So what we're going to work on right now is fixing contrast and levels, and then we're going to talk about controlling hotspots. And this is something that is applicable when you have an actual physical camera and you don't have the right lighting settings on it. If you're using your phone to take pictures, usually our phones will automatically adjust given the lighting of the setting, but sometimes things like this happen and it is useful to know how to do this. So I'm going to start with my original picture layer here over in the layers panel. I am going to duplicate this layer, and an easy way to do that is to click and drag it down here to this plus sign. That will duplicate it. Another way is to right click on that layer. But I like doing this, it's faster. Just click and drag it down here. So I'm going to name this edited picture.
You're naming a layer right now? Is that a best practice that people do?
I would say if you can get yourself into the habit of naming your layers as early as possible, that is a great habit to have. That is not something that I ever learned to do. I've been doing this for, I would say, 15 years now. I generally have 100 layers that are unnamed, but for the purpose of this workshop, I want you guys to be doing everything perfectly, and I don't want to look bad. So I'm naming my layers. So this one's going to be called edited picture. And the reason that I like to do this isn't something that you have to do, but I like to clone my original layer so that I can look back and see what progress I've made on the edited picture. Okay, so there are many different ways to approach this. I'm going to talk about something that's applicable for this particular situation. I think what we want to do here is we want to maintain this beautiful color here while lightening everything else that's in the foreground so that it matches a little bit better. So one way that I'm going to do that is by going up here to select color range. And the reason that I'm going to do this as opposed to a different type of selection tool is that we have all of these little tiny areas within the leaves that we need to select. And there are many selection tools like the magic wand tool over here or a lasso tool where you can hand select areas like this. But then if I started doing that, then I would have to go in here and select this and this and this and try to get all these little tiny blue and pink areas in here. So for this particular instance, where that would be too much effort, I'm going to go into select color range. And what this will do is it will allow me to select anything that is around this color. So I'm going to start here with this blue color. And this fuzziness here, if you move this to the left or right, you can see in this image, anything in white, it's showing you what it will be selecting. So this is giving you the control you need to select more or less. So I'm going to make it a little bit more. And I'm going to say, okay. And as you can see, it selected most of the top. We're still missing some of this pink and orange down here. So I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Also, it's really important to understand selection modifiers. So if you go into select modify, these are different ways that you can change that area that you've just selected. So if I realize that there's a teeny little border around it where it didn't select everything and I want to just grab a tiny bit more, I can go into select, modify, expand, and expand by a couple of pixels to try to get more of that selection.
And Riley, there's a couple of questions about global corrections, which is a bit technical, but why this method over global corrections in this case?
This in particular, I am just trying to show you guys, a couple of specific examples of things that you might come across. I think when it comes to individual photographs like this, it's really up to the user to try to figure out what the best way is to fix the image. And there are a lot of things that are kind of automated where you can do things pretty easily. But the problem with things like that, where you're just doing like a one click and done correction, is that you don't have specific control over it. So it's more effort to do it manually, but I think it gives you much more control over the end result. And also for this one in particular, I'm just using it as an example to show you different selection styles and contrasty type things. So I'm going to go into select, modify, feather. And what that is going to do is it's going to give me a slightly softer, fuzzier selection rather than super jagged, hard lines. So I'm going to feather this by 2 pixels. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this selection and edit, paste special, paste in place. What that will do is just paste it exactly where it already is. And the reason that I'm doing this is with the color selection, we missed out on some of this pink and orange here. So I'm going to repeat this process. This is going to be the sky layer. I'm going to repeat this process, clicking on our edited picture layer, going back into select color range, and trying to get some of that pinkish orange color. And then I'm going to do select, modify, feather again to give it a little bit of a softer selection. Copy those pixels and paste in place again. So now these are our 2 sky layers. I'm going to click on both of them, and the way you do that is you click on one, hold down the shift key and click on the second one, and then right click, merge layers.
So it seems like, just to put into sort of my layperson's perspective, not being a designer, that you are essentially selecting something out of an existing image. So let's say you take a photo of a sunset and you're creating a layer out of it for the purposes of editing those layers with different tools without adjusting, like you said, destroying the integrity of the original image. You're just adding layers that are adjusted over it.
Yes, exactly. And obviously there are a ton of different ways to do this. I could just go into this edited picture layer, and instead of trying to take the sky out, I could instead select the leaves, the foreground.
That would take a long, yeah.
So, there are different ways of doing this. But this way is going to be cool because the sky will stay as a separate layer on top. And when we edit the foreground beneath it, the sky should stay exactly how it is. Okay, so we're back on our edited picture layer. And this is when we're going to come in and try to fix the contrast. So I'm going to go into image, adjustments, levels, and your levels show the level of dark versus light pixels in your image. And as you can see, there's a spike over here on the right, not very much going on in the middle, and then a huge cluster at the left. So this levels panel looks super intimidating, but the long and short of it is that the left side is your darks, the right side is your lights. So anything that is white is going to be right here, anything that's black is here, and then the tones are here in the middle. So by sliding this light level over toward the dark side, that starts to bring more of those light colors out. So that's all the levels tool does. And if you do it in the opposite direction, if you take the dark and make it darker, that's just adding more darkness to the image. And if you take the middle one, that's changing your midtones. So if you slide the midtones to the left, you're bringing more lightness in. If you slide the midtones to the right, you're bringing more darkness in. So that's really all the levels panel does. And it's extremely useful because you can control a lot of things with it. So I'm going to take the lights, bring more of the lightness in there. And as you can see from our image, we're starting to see a lot more detail from the foreground. Without changing the integrity of the background layer. And another way to do this, I'm going to go edit, undo levels. Another way to do this is to go into image, adjustment, brightness, contrast. So the brightness just controls how bright it is. The contrast controls the percentage of midtones versus the percentage of whites and darks. So if you add more contrast, it's going to make it seem more extreme. And if you lessen the contrast, it will make it a lot more even.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yes, so a lot of this stuff is really visual, and that's why I like to do all of this by using manual controls rather than just doing like templated fixes. Because as you can see, you would think looking at this image that if you just up the brightness, that would fix it. But then also you have a contrast issue, and that's something you can only see visually.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important to familiarize yourself with these different tools. I would suggest just get in there and mess with it. Just get into all of these different adjustment panels. This image adjustments, this is where a lot of your photo editing tools are going to live. So just come in here, open it up, play with the sliders, mess around, see what happens. That's the best way to teach yourself.
Riley, I wanted to add too, there are a couple of mobile apps that can help do some of this too. And learning it this way gives me a way better understanding of how to adjust those things, because that, like you said, that histogram, that like little mapping is so like, whoa, I don't know what any of this math means. What is this strange ways that you're doing this? So to get that context is super helpful, but there are also apps on your phone like Snapseed where you can actually do selective brightening of areas based on like radius, based on space. And so if you want like the full control, this is an amazing thing, but there are also apps that can help you do it like as a layperson really quickly, like
Yes.
Snapseed and stuff.
Absolutely. And you're totally right, because I have an app on my phone that gives you almost as much control as Photoshop does. But if you don't know what these tools really mean or how to use them, then it can be a little bit intimidating.
That's
So
totally.
it is nice to get in here and just know what you're talking about. But also, there are a ton of things that you can just click a button and it's going to basically fix it for you. But I love to be able to have complete control over it and know exactly how to change things and modify them for any given situation. So I'm going to move on to our next thing, which is a huge issue if you're using a digital camera. And that is color temperature. So one of the problems with using a digital camera, if you're not super familiar with photography settings, is that it will usually ask you for a white balance setting. And white balance basically just means the camera needs to know what the tonal range of light is given. Are you outdoor in the sun? Are you indoors with, that flickering awful lighting? It's trying to adjust the color based on the light to give you the most natural look. So what happens sometimes, given this example, this is my cat, her name is Misery. My wife refused to be a model for these photos, so I had to take pictures of our pets.
Dang it, Alex.
No.
Sorry.
So I did this on purpose. I went outside and I used our digital camera with an indoor lighting setting. So this is a tungsten bulb setting, which is basically just a normal light bulb setting in outdoors. So if you have pictures that turn out looking blue like this, it's because you had natural light, but your camera was trying to adjust the white balance for artificial light. So what we're going to do here is do the same thing where we are duplicating our original picture layer. And I'm going to name this edited picture. And there are many different ways to adjust colors. If you go into your image adjustments panel, the easiest and fastest way is to go into image adjustments photo filter. And this basically tries to fix the white balance issue for you. So this is a really, really quick, easy tool if you just want to quickly get rid of the blue tones or the orange tones. And this is giving you the chance to control what sort of filter, what sort of lighting filter you're putting on your image. So if your photo is looking too blue, that's a cool color. You're going to want to put a warming filter on it. So basically just come in here, look at the different options. And
I thought that said warning filter, and I was like, I don't have one of those. I should.
You have no warning filter.
I don't.
So I'm just playing around to see what looks best. I think this one looks best, but you can also choose just colors. If you wanted to intentionally give it a sepia color, you could choose that. And then the density just controls how much of that filter is being applied. And I would make sure that this preserve luminosity box is applied, because that will make sure that it's not messing with your lighting or your contrast. So I'm going to do this warming filter and bring the density up to a point where it looks better. Obviously, it's not great, but it's better. If I unclick the preview, you can see it definitely looks more natural already. Oh, and also I wanted to apologize. I meant to apologize when I first got into this part of it, to anybody who has a degree of color blindness, because this, sorry, Charlie.
Oh, wow.
I
Thanks.
apologize.
Thanks a lot.
This one's gonna be almost completely just on your own visual merit, what you think it looks like based on what it looks like in reality. And I know that that's probably very difficult if you have a degree of color blindness. If you do have that issue, this photo filter is a great, easy tool. It's not perfect, but it does make it better. So if you don't have the ability to see colors thoroughly, I would suggest just using this. So this is the first step in this process. We've applied this photo filter. And if I come back over here to my layers panel and I turn off the visibility here, you can see that it's a little bit better. So I'm going to go.
Riley, Benton has a question. If you have to do both, is it better to do light, brightness, contrast levels before you filter, or fix color first?
That is an excellent question. I would suggest fix your colors first, because you want to know what the photo is going to look like, you know, when it's complete. I would suggest doing that, unless it has a really awful problem and you can't see the photo unless you adjust the brightness and contrast first. Obviously, this one has some brightness issues. So, you know, it kind of depends on the situation. I would generally do your color temperature before going in and doing the brightness and contrast, but that's not necessarily the best way to do it. That's just the way that I like to do it. So another tool we can use is image adjustments, color balance. And this, you can adjust the tones in your shadows, midtones, and highlights. This also looks super complicated, but it really isn't. So just look at the photo, see what stands out to you the most. What stands out to me the most is that the shadows, the darkest colors look purple. So I'm going to go into the shadows and try to pull some of that away. And it's helpful to know your color wheel here. We know that the opposite of purple is yellow. So I'm going to pull more of the yellow tones in here. Things like that. And it's already starting to help a little bit. I'm going to do that with our midtones too. And again, this is all very visual, all completely subjective to the user. But I would also suggest just hopping into this panel and playing around with it as much as you can. So if I uncheck our preview, you can see it's already getting even a little bit better. And then if I toggle off this layer visibility, it is much better. And one last tool that we can use if you really want to get deep into it is image adjustment selective color. And selective color allows you to change each tone individually. So if I'm still seeing these kind of reddish purplish tones in the blacks, I can go in here to black and then change each of these sliders just for the black tones. So just making these tiny adjustments all visually. And I could sit here and mess with this for a really long time, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. That's just the idea. So unchecking the preview, you can see the progress that that has made. So here, if I toggle on and off the layer visibility, that has really done a lot to help fix that color temperature issue. Okay, I have another one, Charlie. How are we doing on time? Am I going?
You are. I think based on your list, we have a little bit more to cover here, but yeah, please. And again, if anybody has any specific questions or needs, now is a great opportunity to ask an expert. But yeah, please keep going, Riley, and I'll give you like a heads up. We'll be at 4:45 right now or 7:45 your time. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So this next one, this is my dog, Jane. I asked my wife if she would hold her up like Simba for this photo. So this is the opposite problem. This is indoor photography with outdoor lighting. And I am going to use this as an opportunity to show you guys something kind of advanced. So if this is way too advanced for you, then just don't worry about it. I'm going to show you how to do actions. And actions are simply a tool for you to apply edits that you've done to one photo to multiple photos at once. So, for example, if you took a series of photos of an item because you just wanted to see, like, different angles or things like that, and all of those pictures all had the same lighting issue, and you needed to fix it on all of them, making an action, you can basically record the motions of yourself fixing the first image and then just apply that exact same series of events to the rest of the photos. So with the click of a button, you're fixing all of the rest of them. So I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'm going to go to Window, Actions, and that will bring up our Actions panel. I'm going to create a new action by clicking on this little plus button and name it Fixing Color Temperature. So really quickly, I'll just go into Image Adjustments Color Balance, which is what we did with the last image. And I will mess around with our levels here. Obviously, you can see that this picture of Jane is way too orange, and that curtain behind her is supposed to be just a little bit off-white. So knowing what I know about how the image is supposed to look, I'm just going to adjust it accordingly. And again, I know that I'm going really fast here, but this is where it would be great for you to just come into this color balance panel for yourself and just kind of mess around with it. Just slide these sliders all around. Make sure you're preserving your luminosity. So now that I have done that, I can toggle on the preview on and off, and you can see that that has made a great improvement.
Riley, I don't want to call you out here, but did you copy that layer before you started editing?
I didn't.
Oh my God.
I didn't. Thank
JK.
you for calling me out. It's fine. It's
Oh, it's
okay.
fine. Are you going to name that layer too? Are you going to hit save at some point? I don't know. We will see. It's an
I
adventure.
haven't saved at all. Save.
Don't do what this is also a lesson in what not to do, everybody. It's very important. You learn from Riley's
I
mistakes
just love
here.
that you are calling me out on this.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a lot better than it was. I'm just gonna come in and do a little tiny levels fix, which is what we did in that first image, to try to just get her to be a little bit more like what she looks like in real life. Okay, just a tiny adjustment. So let's say that's all we wanted to do to this photo. It has been recording my actions. So I'm going to hit the stop button. And now you can see we have this action called fixing color temperature. So if we come into another photo that has that exact same problem, this one is called shame. I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to name it edited photo. So we take the layer that we want this applied to, go into our actions panel, click that action and press the play button. Boom. It immediately applies that exact same action to this photo. Super useful. I have to admit, when my college professor was showing us about actions the first time, I was like, yawn, I don't care. This is boring. Admittedly, it does seem boring, but it is very useful. So I would suggest just keep that in the back of your mind. Maybe one day you will need it.
So true. Wow. Also, how do you make Jane more amenable to what's happening in the photo? Is there a way to change the mood of the person or the subject? I don't like it's psychic.
I think by offering her a treat.
Got it. Got it. Good tip. Good tip.
How to do it. So we've learned a lot of things that are very useful when submitting GISH items in particular, but I have something else on my list that we could play with if we have a minute or two of extra time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So we are going to play around with airbrushing.
I'm sorry, what's happening here right now? What is this? What happened here?
So obviously this poor individual has come down with a case of purple pox.
That's
and
unfortunate.
We do not want this image to show his purple pox.
But do we though?
So when I was learning about airbrushing in college, they taught us about ethical airbrushing.
Ethical airbrushing?
Yes. As you probably know, and I'm sorry if this is like a huge shock to anybody, but most photos that we see in magazines or on television have been airbrushed. They have their imperfections taken out. And sometimes that can be a little bit unethical. So we learned about ethical airbrushing, and basically that just means instead of trying to alter the way a person looks, you're trying to make the photo look more like the person, which is a nice way of looking at it. So obviously in this photo, this isn't giving you a good indication of what Misha looks like. All you're seeing is his purple pox.
I just respectfully disagree, but all right.
Okay, well, I mean, you know him better than I do, so like.
I would say this is pretty accurate. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's had the purple pox. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. So we just want to make it so that when you're looking at this picture, you're seeing Misha and you're not seeing his purple pox. So that's ethical airbrushing. So again, I am going to duplicate the original picture layer. I'm going to rename it. And then we are going to play around with two tools, the clone stamp tool and the healing brush tool. Clone stamp tool basically just literally clones a set of pixels from one area to another. And the healing brush tool basically averages the pixels between one spot and another. So these both have their individual applications. And for this job, I'm going to use them one after another. So I'm going to start with our clone stamp tool. And the way that this works is you're taking pixels from one area of the picture and putting them over another area of the picture. So the way that you select the pixels that you want to clone is by holding down the Option or Alt key, depending upon if you are on a Mac or a PC. I am on a Mac, so I will hold down the Option key, and that gives us this target. And we're going to put the target over an area that we want to clone. And you want to make sure that you are getting an area that has similar lighting and color. So for this particular circle, I want to get something around here because it's a very similar color. So I'll click right here. And also I should mention up here in the top left, if you click on this little arrow, you can change the size of your brush and you can also change the hardness. So if you want it to be hard edges or if you want it to be soft and fluffy, that's where you change that. And once again, I would encourage you to come in here and just play around with it, figure out what you like best. So I am targeting this area and I'm cloning those pixels over here. And for this one, I want this area. The lighting is similar. And you just do that over and over again.
Is it possible to clone stamp out various politicians? Does it work on other things other than a layer in Photoshop?
I mean, I wish.
Got it.
I wish we could clone stamp out certain unnamed politicians.
Okay, great.
If only we had these tools that were applicable to real life. If only. So if we have an area of like over here where it's a little bit more complicated, you're getting into some stubble. Make sure that you are in an area where the stubble is sort of the same. And then if you're not totally happy with how that turned out, this is where the healing brush can come in handy, because the healing brush is going to take an average of all of the pixels in that area with the average of the pixels in your selection. So it will just kind of help blend those two areas a little bit. So that is that. And I'm just gonna do this real quick and we can talk while I'm doing this. This was the last thing I had on my sheet.
Great. And if you have any questions, by all means, use the Q&A button here. There's one that's come in here, Riley. So GISH requests that photos be submitted in high res. They assumed that iPhone automatically took, photos in high res. For printing and publishing, why is that? And do you have any recommendations on how to fix something after the fact if it's lower res, or how to update that, or what to look for when you're saving out files?
Yeah, that is a super great thing. And I could do an entire seminar just on that specifically. Something that you really want to look for, I'm going to go back to our shame document because this is a clean document. So something that you want to look for is your image size. If you're opening something up in Photoshop, you can check this really easily by going to image size. And this is going to show you not only the size in pixels, but you can also see how large this would be if printed out in inches. And then you can also change the resolution, and resolution is just the number of pixels in your document. So a lower resolution is going to give you that fuzzy pixelated appearance, and a higher resolution will be clearer. So if you are submitting something like GISH items where there's a possibility that they could be printed like in the coffee table book, I would suggest always, always trying to work in 300 resolution.
300 DPI, was that right?
300 DPI. That is print quality resolution. That will ensure that if it is printed out at full size, it's not going to look pixelated. Anything that's just for web only, 72 is standard, and that is fine. And your question about changing something after the fact, unfortunately, if something has been compressed, there's no way to add back resolution. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for a minute. Oh, nope. Stop sharing. There's no way to add resolution to an image. So it's always best to try to make sure that you are taking photos in high resolution to start with, and then sending them to yourself in a format that's not going to compress it. So some messaging servers like Facebook Messenger, or if you send something to yourself through a text message, those things will compress the image to make them smaller for sending, and that's what you don't want. I would suggest if you have to send something from your phone to your computer or sending from your phone to somebody else, email it or add it to a cloud server, because that won't compress it and it won't make it smaller resolution.
Would you say if you have AirDrop, for example, as an option, like something like that, you can look it up, but there are definitely compression algorithms and different messengers, and if there's a way to get it directly on there, it's much better when you do upload it, because we can accept very large files. It costs more money for us on the one side, which is not something that we talk about a lot, but it ensures the integrity of the item so that they can go into the coffee table book at a high enough resolution.
Yeah, that's probably something I should have mentioned to begin with, since this is applicable to GISHers, and I apologize for that. But yes, you always want to try to start with the highest resolution possible, because then there's a much better chance that it can be printed properly.
Totally. Jennifer asks, were you doing multiple clonings on one spot, putting multiple circles over one spot instead of just one? Is that a practice?
Yeah, I can show you if I share really quickly again. I'll go back to that picture. So if I go back to the clone stamp tool, I think maybe what she's referring to is the fact that I'm just sort of clicking this around. So for certain instances, instead of just cloning and doing a full clone like this, in areas like here where there's a tonal range, you can totally just take different areas to clone if it helps you a little bit more. So in the in-between, I'm clicking option click on different areas of the image to just pull that in.
And you could adjust you said the hardness and also the size of the selection that you're taking to clone it, right?
Yeah, and let me show you just really quickly what the hardness does, because this is really interesting. And this, obviously, everything in Photoshop has a specific application that it's useful for. Most of the time, you're going to want very little hardness with this, but I'll show you what it does when you do a hard selection. So if I take this area here, option click, and apply it here, you're just going to get a hard circle. That's literally all that the hardness means. And I'm going to undo that. And then I'm going to change this hardness, make it a little bit larger. So this is going to give me a nice fluffy selection. So if I option click here and put it over here, oh, look, there's just a hole in his face. It's not just a hard circular nostril. So obviously those have their own applications depending upon how you want it to look.
What if you want to remove the chaotic glint in his eye a little bit? Like there's just too much chaos happening in there. How can you, is there a way to deaden his eyes a little bit or calm him down?
Fortunately, even with my level of expertise,
Okay.
that's not something that I can do. I am so sorry.
Okay. Well, to be clear, also, just to reiterate, we are talking about adjustments and we're talking about Photoshop. You are, per the commandments, not entitled to photoshopping imagery and changing it substantially unless called for by the item itself. It will say specifically Photoshop okay or photo editing, etc. Those are, it's an important thing. There's a few reasons for that. Obviously, one is if the item asks for something, we want you to do the thing. We don't want a visual representation of the thing, and it's easy to sort of fast track that you did that thing in that way. It makes it more difficult, but that's also part of the gameplay, which is, if we want you taking a photo of yourself in a certain place or doing a certain thing, it's easy to pretend with Photoshop. I know when I worked on the yearbook in high school, we used to mess around with Photoshop and make all sorts of terrible things happen to people and places at our school. But it's important. So these image adjustments too, when you're a photographer, there are some in-camera things that can happen to help adjust the tones and things like that. But these are, these are tools that you can use, but make sure you're following the commandments when you use them.
Right. You're fixing it. You're not faking it. You don't want to put somebody in front of the Eiffel Tower. But if you take a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower and the color is just so blue that it's distracting, that's when you fix it. There you go.
Fix, not fake. Yeah. But removing there's a bit of I think you may want to do a thread at some point about ethical airbrushing. There's a lot of questions and thoughts and feelings about ethical airbrushing here, so maybe we can take that to another time. Let's say someone asks, say I wanted to copy Misha's iris. And his iris. This is very specific, Amy.
Super specific.
To add to another picture, how would I select it?
All right, if you want to just really briefly learn that, that's another selection tool. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, there are many ways to do this, as always. Probably the easiest way, not necessarily the best way, would be to come in here with the lasso tool. Lasso tool is just a selection tool where you can straight up draw your selection. So I'm just going to come here and draw around his iris and then edit, copy, edit, paste. And now I can move his iris around. And there are several ways to do that. Another way would be to do a circular marquee. So if you go to this marquee, click and hold, go down to the elliptical marquee tool. You can get a circle like that. That one's going to be a little bit more accurate. Just depends on your level of patience, I guess. So that's that. You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, Riley, thank you so much. Everybody, feel free to dogpile on Riley on Twitter to ask her lots of questions. She will be writing her master's thesis on ethical airbrushing and the state of what is a blemish and not a blemish. I'm sure that book will be coming out very soon. This topic is obviously very important in GISH, and this topic is also very layered. Riley, you spent years learning elements of design, not only in school, but also on the job. There's a new challenge every day, I'm sure, not just with the people that you work with who run stands, but there's so much to learn and so much more to learn, obviously, that we've sort of scratched the surface, but hopefully you'll all be more interested in learning more about this and keep going. You know, if this is a first time thing for you, great. If it's not, it's also great to hear how other designers sort of approach things. Yeah, anything else you want to say, Riley, before we adjourn?
I think as I said, I spoke to a lot of people who said they were newbies, and I know that Photoshop can seem really intimidating when you first open it up. There are so many different things, so many different panels and tools and adjustments. Honestly, if you have the time, the best way to learn it is just to play. That's how I learned it. I started using Photoshop as a preteen, and I just did it as a hobby for many, many years until I felt like I was good enough. And that's the best way to do it. So don't be intimidated. I'm still learning new things. Honestly, I've been at this for at least 15 years, and I'm still learning new tools and techniques. And if you have any questions, you can contact me on Twitter and ask, and I will try to answer.
And we will be sending out the list of resources that Riley tweeted along with a link to this video if you want to check that out and review some of this information. Again, this is a very broad topic and a lot of things and a lot of levels of understanding about how to do it. You know, just play is the operative word here. You know, there are a lot of free resources and a lot of great things if you invest in time and effort. And there's all sorts of sort of classes you can take virtually and just dive in and have fun. All right. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for upgrading. You helped children in Afghanistan in the process, and we're really grateful for that. And we're grateful to you, Riley, for taking the time out of your evening on the East Coast there to dive into Misha's problematic pox and all sorts of stuff. So appreciate it. Thanks all. More soon from GISH HQ. Signing off. Thank you, Berto. Thank you.
Thank you, Berto. Thank you, captioners.